Welcome to week 6 of the Unlocking the Our Father campaign. And this week, again, we're getting into, in a certain sense, the good stuff. Not because the other petitions weren't good, they're, in a certain sense, maybe even more important, but because we're in the petitions now that deal with all the things we normally have to ask God. All the things that we normally like to ask God. Last week, we referred to, give us this day our daily bread. And today we're dealing with another reality that we all have to deal with regularly as human beings. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And this is just part of humanity. Ever since the Garden of Eden, we have always had to deal with the fact that there are sins. There are trespasses. We do things wrong. You know, if you look back at the Garden of Eden, what was the original situation? Satan begins to tempt us with a lie. It's a lie about God. And the lie says, it's not like Satan comes out immediately and says, just, you know what, I want you to totally renounce God, Adam and Eve, just, forget everything about him. He says, no. He begins with a lie saying, did God really say not to eat from any of the trees? God never said that. God said you can eat from any tree you want except for that one. So Satan already begins with a lie. And why does he say that? He wants to plant a seed of mistrust about God. Is God really good? Is God maybe holding out on you? Wouldn't it maybe be better if you kind of do your own thing? And, I'm sure God most of the time wants your well-being, but he's got a little thing there that he wants to keep to himself. I'm not really sure you can trust him. And it's essentially, that lie is saying, if you just take care of yourself on your own terms, you sure use God when he's there for you, but he might not always be there. Make sure you take care of yourself on your own terms first, and everything's going to be better for you. That is the lie. Selfishness, mistrust, failure to open ourselves up to others, closing ourselves into ourselves. That is the root of every trespass, of every sin in humanity from that moment onward. And that's something you and I deal with all the time, not just in other people, but in ourselves. After that original sin came everything else. Adam and Eve start fighting, they start accusing each other, saying, well, she made me do it, and he made me do it, and the snake made me do it. There enters in relationships with dominion, lust. All of a sudden they looked at each other and realized, hey, we're naked. And all of a sudden they looked at each other in a totally different way. Dominion entered in, all kinds of things entered in, because they began to be selfish. They began not to trust in God. And what happens? When Adam and Eve committed their first sin, it says, what do? They run off and they hide themselves. They sew fig leaves to cover up their nakedness. They begin to feel guilt. And from the moment they feel guilt, and the moment any one of us feels guilt, we go through all kinds of things to cover up. We either run away and try to pretend that we're not guilty, or we try all kinds of elaborate, religious practices to try to cover up our guilt. In fact, the whole history of religion, not only Catholicism, not even Judaism, the whole history of every single religion ever created is full of, how do I deal with guilt? How do I deal with the fact that there is sin, and that I have also sinned, and I'm responsible for some of it? How am I going to deal with it? And this is human history. We look at human history, what does it come down to? There's an entire succession of, we are guilty, or somebody else offends us, and what do? Retaliation. Retaliation. And what happens when we retaliate? Well, now I've retaliated against him. Now he has a cause to be mad at me, and he retaliates back. When he retaliates back, then now I've been offended, and I retaliate back. And this entire spiral of violence, of retaliation, of hatred, of judgments, of criticism, all of this stuff gets out of control. Just take a look at the history of the Middle East, for example. Why is it that thousands of years after Christ, after the people who have received Moses, the prophets, so many things that have happened in the Middle East, why is the Middle East still a hotbed? Because pardon in that sense is foreign. pardon in the Christian sense of the meaning is foreign to those religions. When you have been oppressed, when you've been treated badly, the response for them is going to be justice. And justice meaning I get what I want. Not that everyone gets what they need. Justice meaning you did something wrong to me here, and I'm going to get what I want. If I've oppressed you in any other way, well, that's a different issue. The revelation and the revolution of Christianity, the revolution that the Sacred Heart of Jesus brings to us, is to say, God is a God who pardons our offenses and asks us to be men and women who learn how to pardon. The gospel is actually full of stories from Jesus about this need for us to learn how to forgive. And as he says in the Our Father, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. For example, let's remember when Jesus says, if you come into the temple to offer up your sacrifice, and what was the purpose for a sacrifice? The purpose of a sacrifice was principally going to always be reparation for your sins. It's a little bit like you and I going to confession, okay? Jesus says, if you come into the temple in order to offer up your sacrifice, and then all of a sudden you remember that your brother has something against you, he says, leave your sacrifice behind, go and be reconciled, and then come back. Okay? Imagine that. Really, this applies to our confessions. If you go to the confessional and you remember in the confessional that you and your brother have this problem and you're not, well, first of all, confess it, but part of your confession is going to be go and be reconciled. And if you're not willing to do that, even if, especially if you don't tell the priest about it, your confession was invalid. Invalid. Because if we're not ready to open up our hearts, if we're not willing to at least start making those movements, those attempts to pray for reconciliation, at least to pray for it, to do something about it, then we're not in a good disposition. We can't even open our hearts to receive God's pardon of ourselves. Jesus gives us the example of always coming to us first. Remember in the parable of the prodigal son, remember the son goes off, wastes his father's inheritance, actually totally disrespects and dishonors his father, and essentially tells him, Father, I can't even wait for you to die. Just give me my inheritance right now so I can go off and do my own thing. Total disrespect. Goes off, wastes it, gets in a hard time, and all of a sudden remembers, oh, I was much better when I was with Dad. Goes back home. It doesn't say the dad waits for the kid to run and throw himself at his feet. The father was out watching, and he says he goes to the son. The minute he sees him in the distance, he says he runs out to the son. He embraces him. He cuts him off. He says, you're already forgiven. Gives him back everything. That's the way God deals with us. Now, why is it that you and I have such a hard time? The truth is, forgiveness always demands a price. Forgiveness is not about saying, you know, what you did really wasn't important, it didn't hurt me. That's not forgiveness. That's just simply saying, I don't even respect you enough to even consider what you did a problem. Forgiveness really is when it says, yes, because I love you, and because there was something that ruptured or damaged our love, yeah, I was hurt. But I value you and I love you more than whatever that thing was that damaged and ruptured our relationship. And because forgiveness, therefore, is acknowledging there was a wrongdoing, acknowledging sin, there's a price on both people's part. The price of the one who does the forgiving, because that person has to say, despite your offense, I love you, I care about you, I value you more. And that means that if my honor was hurt or whatever, I'm willing to put that aside because the primary thing for me is your person. And on the person who needs to be the one asking for the forgiveness, obviously, it costs to be able to recognize, you know what, I was selfish, I was wrong, I know I hurt you, and I need to put that selfishness behind me. And if I need to do anything to make up, to make reparation, to make recompense, I'm willing to do those things in order to make up for the damage done to you, because I value you more than my own inconvenience, my own pride, my own whatever. That is reconciliation. That costs. And that's why Jesus, for example, when we look at what did Jesus pay in order to reconcile us? Jesus was nailed to a cross. That is the price of reconciliation right there. That is the price of forgiveness right there. Jesus didn't say, hey guys, it's no problem, just continue, forget all that sin stuff, I know you love you. Jesus says, yeah, I'm willing to pay the price. I didn't have to do that. God never had to do that. But he says, I want you to understand what love is. And I want you to understand what sin is, and I want you to understand what reconciliation is. On our own, frankly, we are not strong enough. On our own, nobody is really strong enough for real reconciliation, for real out-of-the-heart reconciliation. And that is why we need God. We need to be plugged into God. We need His grace in our lives. And that is why we pray, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those. We're not just saying, Lord, forgive me my sins, and I hope I can manage to get around forgiving the others. We're also praying, God, give me the grace I need to truly forgive. Give me the grace I need to open my heart to forgive other people. And that'll be the condition then for me to be able to really come to you and receive your forgiveness. Give me the grace that I need to be like you, to have a heart like you, to be open like you, to be selfless, to be willing to pay the price like you were willing to pay it. Don't let me treat sin like it's something light, like it didn't matter, like it was nothing. Give me the grace to really recognize the gravity of sin and to deal with the gravity of sin and to wrestle with that sin and to say, I am willing to take it on with God's grace, to smash that sin, to put it behind and not let anyone else's sin become a cause of conflict. This is what reconciliation really implies. Now, there's an obstacle to our mentality. We talked about the fact that Jesus took our sin upon himself. For a lot of us, that really doesn't even make sense. How can he's God, he's sinless. How can this man, even if he's God, pay for my sin? It simply doesn't seem to make sense. We don't understand the idea of substitution, that he substitutes, he pays for me, he steps in for me, he substitutes for me, when we're closed into ourselves. But when you and I are already living a life of charity, when we're already living a life where we are giving ourselves for others, when we are seeking the good of others, when we are seeking to love others, seeking to be kind to others, seeking charity in the end of the day, substitution is natural. It's about saying, I want to make a gift of myself to you because I love you. And if that means doing something that is difficult for you, I will do it for you because I love you. So this mentality of forgiveness always puts Christ at the center. Again, as with every petition we've asked so far, in the end of the day, each one of these petitions is saying, God, I ask you to become the center of my life in this dimension of my life, because I simply cannot forgive on my own. I need you, God. I need to be plugged into you. I need to be, in a certain sense, an extension of you. I need to be part of you. Father, teach me how to be truly your son or your daughter. It's a comfort to know that we are never alone in this. It's a comfort to know that we have God's promise, we have His grace, because I think there's nothing maybe more heartrending or difficult than when we've been offended by a person that we love, or when we ourselves have done the offense, and when we need to make those acts of pardon. Let's continue to pray for one another. Pray especially for those of our community who need to learn how to pardon somebody who has hurt them or somebody been hurt by them. Pray for a spirit of reconciliation. It's a divine spirit. It's something that surpasses our humanity. Let's pray for that spirit of reconciliation within our community. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.